Hello and welcome to Nick Allen's Digital Literacy Podcast. This podcast is for assignment 5.5, Learning Environment / Communication. In this podcast, in this assignment, I will be addressing the criteria 5.5a, b, c and d. Okay, criteria 5.5a requires that I explain a range, or at least 3 environments in which digital literacy learning may take place. I'm going to explain 3 of them. 5.5b also requires that I analyse 2 characteristics of the individual environments. So I'm going to take 3 environments and analyse 2 characteristics or more. As follows. My first environment is the traditional computer room or computer classroom in a college, for example. It's typically a rows of desks with PCs on them. Very often the rows of desks all face the front, face the whiteboard or projector. In a lot of computer rooms, sometimes learners can be sitting in looking in different directions, facing in different directions, because computers are kind of any old how, just to fit as many computers in as possible without necessarily any consideration given to how it functions as a learning environment, because very often these types of computer classroom double up as just a computer room for students to use as and when, without actually any delivery necessarily taking place. So I guess a couple of characteristics: they're full of computers. They very often don't have any other desks, as in desks just with for a normal way of working, pen and paper and so forth. Some do. But it's quite unusual for there to be both in these types of computer room, as in both desks with PCs so that you can work on computers, and desks without, so that you can work in a more traditional way without them. There are some computer rooms like that, but they're fewer because of space considerations. Okay. So those are a couple of characteristics of the traditional computer-based classroom or computer classroom. The second environment is a traditional classroom, i.e. one in which there are no computers or just one computer, which traditionally the teacher would use to display onto a projection screen. Classrooms are set up in various ways. Teachers very often customise the classroom for their own particular use in terms of ways in which tables and chairs are laid out, but they don't feature devices that the students can use. However, we can now bring in tablet computers or laptops into this environment now. Particularly in our college, we now have laptop trolleys. We now have 3 laptop trolleys, 1 per floor, and we also have a cabbie box full of tablet computers, iPads in fact, which can be hired out by the teacher for the students' use. And so we can now bring in digital literacy using devices into the traditional classroom. So characteristics of this would be that you would definitely need to rely on the Wi-Fi access within the institution, within the building, because otherwise it just wouldn't work, because you can't obviously have trailing cables for everybody to plug in their device. So it would look like a traditional classroom, just with portable devices being used. My third environment would be the student's home, in which they would access learning using their own device. So one not provided for them, but their own, which could include their own PC, a laptop, tablet, a phone, or possibly even a games console these days. You can access the internet on those as well. The characteristics of that environment obviously vary from individual to individual. Some people like to work in their own room, their own bedroom. Some people work in the lounge. Some people work in a kitchen. Some people are posh and have a study. So it's really whatever the learner, wherever they feel comfortable, wherever they're set up to work, wherever it's comfortable. So again, they can entirely customise to their needs. Okay, now I'm going to address criteria 5.5c and explain the importance of communication, relationship building and emotional intelligence when working with adults and young people undertaking digital literacy learning. I'm also going to allude or mention to some communication strategies used with these digital literacy learners in doing that, and I'll then review them at the end. The first thing that comes to mind with regard to the importance of communication when people are undertaking digital literacy learning is the clarity of instruction. Very often students are doing something new, or they're encountering a technology or a piece of software for the first time, and that brings with it a degree of fear and anxiety, trepidation. Some learners are very confident that they'll be able to master this new technology that they're being presented with. However, probably for almost all of them, and definitely some of them, there will be a huge anxiety associated with it because it's new, it's different, they've never done it before, and they're a bit scared. A lot of them have negative experiences as well. Things they've not been able to do it, it's been frustrating, hasn't worked. People get ahead of them, which is one of the main problems when doing kind of digital literacy, anything with digital literacy or any new piece of technology or software, is that some people will master it straight away and leave others behind who get frustrated when they see the difference in progress between themselves and their peers. So in order not to leave people behind, clarity of instruction is extremely important, and that usually needs to be probably threefold. First of all, it needs to be very clearly stated verbally by the teacher to the whole class, and probably accompanied by a demonstration of the technology or technique or tool that's being used in the lesson. And additionally, as well as there being a whole class explanation or demonstration, there should probably be some form of written step-by-step instructions that go along with that, so that when the teacher's explanation has passed, when that's been given, the students then have something to refer to back up what they've just heard and what they've just seen. As I say, a list of step-by-step instructions certainly helps. The third sort of method of communication, if you like, to ensure that clarity and that things are understood, is simply one-to-one guidance and instruction, so that when you get students undertaking the task, that you then go and back up those instructions by checking in with individuals and having a conversation to the effect that is this are you coping? Are you able to do this? What stage are you at? And sort of problem solving, troubleshooting as and when needed. So the clarity of instruction is really, really important. Given what I said earlier about the anxiety, fear, and sometimes sort of immediate feelings of frustration and even resentment that can come up in response to new strategies or new tools, technologies, techniques using digital literacy. It's very important that the teacher has a productive rapport with students, with adults, with young people, and that they trust that you are going to be able to get them to do this thing that they've never done before. If they trust you and they feel that you have time for them and you have a productive relationship with them, then they'll more likely have the patience to overcome those initial anxieties and fears. And that's where the emotional intelligence comes in. Understanding why it is certain learners get extremely frustrated when presented with technology. I have a couple of learners, one in particular, who whenever I introduce any kind of new technology tool or technique that involving computers or devices, immediately has emotional barriers to it, and I have to make it a priority to address her anxieties and her frustrations very quickly, so that she doesn't react emotionally and get very frustrated with the task in the lesson, and that really means adopting a very reassuring sort of tone with her, and as soon as possible going to her individually and walking her through the tasks, as soon as it's been explained to the whole class. I find that with that type of learner, if you don't do that very quickly, the learner will switch off, will not want to do the task. In the case of this particular example, she gets very, very frustrated, and that results in essentially little tantrums, which very often result in her leaving the lesson. However, if I can overcome that quickly, as I said, with a bit of reassurance and a bit of individual one-to-one guidance, then in actual fact she'll master the technology, the tool, the technique quite quickly and be able to use it just the same as everyone else. It's just that she just it's a sort of a belief that I won't be able to do that because it's new and it's different and it looks complicated. But she's just perhaps an extreme example of something that all adult learners and young people go through on one level or another when they're faced with something new and different, which digital literacy often involves. Okay, so I'm going to review some communication strategies, some of which I've already mentioned. Clarity of instruction to a whole class, accompanied by demonstration, is one strategy. Having that backed up with a set of step-by-step written instructions is another strategy. One-to-one communication with individuals after that initial whole class instruction is given, particularly with learners who find it challenging to adopt a new tool, technique, or technology. In terms of improvement, in particular in my own practice, I would like to try something which I've maybe only tried once or twice before. Or maybe I'd like to bring into my teaching. Would be a sort of a buddying system, whereby I would pair learners with reasonably advanced digital literacy skills with ones that with slightly less advanced. I'd probably do that. One easy way to do that is to get people to stand in a row in a sort of continuum, if you like, with people who feel digitally less confident at one end, and those that feel digitally very confident at the other. And I've always found that whenever I've done that, not necessarily with digital literacy, but any other kind of ability or level of confidence, I've got students are quite good at working out where they fit on that continuum, and then you simply divide the line in half and match up the ones that are less confident with the ones that are more confident, and you sit them together, so that if your instructions fall on stony ground with some learners, then they've got somebody sat next to them in the lesson who can walk them through it because they've cottoned onto it more quickly. So I'd like to try that a bit more in my teaching as a kind of standard practice with regard to anything digital. One thing I do need to address is my approach with regard to sort of training students to use digital tools that I use or like to use, or have started kind of using as a part of my everyday practice or regular practice, and that's maybe involves structuring my learning programs so that there is a period at the start of the year, the academic year, for a few weeks, maybe a month or so, where there are tasks simply designed to train the students in how to use the various tools, techniques and technologies that I like to use. For example, I like to use Dropbox a lot to file share. I like to use the Microsoft Office suite, Office 365 that is. I like to use Notebook, OneNote, Class Notebook. I like to use WordPress as a blog for recording students' assignments, or for them to write their assignments in. And these are all things that require the learner to become proficient in. They need the training before you expect them to be up and running with the actual assignments. So that's something that I would definitely introduce from next year. And that, as I say, that's a kind of a training in each of those applications, so that the use of them becomes kind of second nature at the start of the course, before they're actually required to get involved in using them for actual assignments. One other thing I want to say briefly as well is with regard to communication strategies, is the importance of feedback. I've talking very much about instructions mostly to students about how to do tasks and how to use tools, techniques and technologies in order to accomplish tasks. But one of the most important areas is with feedback, and in particular the difference between written and verbal feedback, and actually the combination of both. I've found many times that I've given very detailed feedback, often electronically, via things like Moodle or Turnitin, which is a piece of software for the submission of assignments, essays, and I've used the comment functions in that, in Word and on PDF documents extensively with learners, and also then written quite comprehensive, summative sort of feedback, if you like, of their work, and it's very often been either not read properly or not received in a very positive way because of the lack of emotion in the written word. And what I've started to try to do is make much more use of audio feedback using recording technology, a bit like this, I guess. But you can there's a function, for example, within Turnitin where you can record audio feedback alongside your written feedback, and I find that does a lot to improve how positively your feedback is received, because there's a tone of voice which is much more engaging and more reassuring than your written comments are. Written comments are usually read with an internal voice, of the learner's internal voice, which is much more critical than the voice which you wanted to give the feedback with. There's a disconnect between those two things, and often if you actually accompany some of your written feedback with verbal feedback, you, just by the tone of your voice, you will be able to reassure the learner that their work isn't terrible, as they sometimes think, having read the comments, but in fact is good, and and improvements are easy to make. So the use of communication strategies are also really important for assessment of learner work as well. Okay, that brings me to the end of assignment 5.5 and addressing criteria 5.5A, B, C and D.